Velociraptor pack attacks T-Rex. Then something shocking changes everything. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The metallic sphere slammed into the jungle floor with a deafening crash, sending a shockwave through the trees. The earth trembled beneath the weight of its impact, leaves and dirt exploding into the air in a blinding cloud. The Tyrannosaurus Rex let out a deep, guttural growl, its massive head swinging toward the unknown object, nostrils flaring as it inhaled the strange, metallic scent. The Velociraptors had gone silent. Their sharp eyes were locked onto the sphere, their once coordinated movements now scattered, uncertain. They had never seen anything like this before. The jungle, which had erupted into chaos just moments ago, was now completely still. Then a sound. A low hum filled the air, emanating from the sphere's smooth silver surface. It was unlike anything natural, a rhythmic, mechanical vibration. The T-Rex took a cautious step back, its powerful tail sweeping behind it, muscles tense. The raptors lowered their bodies, their claws digging into the dirt, ready to either attack or flee. Their leader let out a low screech, a command for the others to hold their position. The sphere shifted. It wasn't just sitting there, it was moving. Slowly, it began to roll. Not randomly, deliberately. It was as if it were alive. The T-Rex let out a warning roar, its instincts screaming danger. But even the king of the dinosaurs had never encountered something like this before. And then, the sphere split open. A hiss of steam erupted from its core, the metallic shell pulling apart in perfect symmetry, revealing a glowing blue light at its center. The air around it crackled, energy pulsing through the ground like lightning trapped beneath the surface. The raptors snapped their heads back, some taking cautious steps away. Their leader, however, stood firm, its eyes locked onto whatever was inside the sphere. The T-Rex's muscles tensed. The jungle held its breath. Then, something moved inside. A shape, tall, unnatural, not from this world. The T-Rex snapped its jaws, a deep warning growl rumbling through its chest. The raptors hissed, tails lashing. Whatever had just arrived, it wasn't prey, and it wasn't alone. The air grew heavy. Then, from within the glowing light, something stepped out. The jungle air felt thicker now, weighed down by something unseen, something unnatural. Every living thing, from the smallest insect to the mightiest predator, had gone silent. The Velociraptor pack remained motionless, their usual confidence replaced with an eerie hesitation. Even the Tyrannosaurus Rex, a predator that feared nothing, seemed unsure. And then it stepped out. From within the glowing core of the sphere, a figure emerged. It was tall, its form almost humanoid but wrong. Its skin was metallic, yet it moved with an eerie fluidity, as though metal had been given life. Strange symbols pulsed along its body, glowing faintly in the dim jungle light. Its head turned, scanning its surroundings with something that resembled intelligence. The moment its glowing, unnatural eyes landed on the dinosaurs, the jungle itself seemed to react. The T-Rex roared, shaking the ground. The raptors screeched, their bodies shifting, preparing to attack. But the figure did not flinch. Instead, it lifted its arm. A flash of blue energy crackled from its palm, striking a tree to its right. The impact shattered the bark, sending debris flying, and a second later, the entire tree collapsed. The message was clear. It wasn't here to run. It was here to dominate. The Velociraptor leader was the first to move. With a sharp screech, it signaled the pack. They attacked as one. Their claws flashed, their speed turning them into blurs of movement. They darted toward the figure, aiming for its legs, its arms, anything vulnerable. The first raptor leapt, only to be swatted away midair. The force sent it flying, crashing into the dirt, motionless. Another raptor slid beneath the figure, attempting to strike from below. A burst of energy shot downward, and the ground itself rippled, sending the raptor tumbling back, disoriented. The T-Rex watched. It had never seen anything like this. For the first time in its life, it wasn't sure if it was the hunter or the hunted. Then the figure turned its head toward the Rex. For a moment, there was stillness. Then it attacked. A blast of energy shot from its body, aimed directly at the T-Rex's massive chest. But the Rex was ready. With a thunderous step forward, it dodged, the energy searing the earth where it had stood just moments before. And then it charged. The ground shook as the full force of the king of dinosaurs rushed forward. The battle had begun. The Tyrannosaurus Rex barreled forward, the force of its charge cracking the ground beneath its feet. Its muscles coiled with raw power, its jaws widening, revealing rows of serrated teeth capable of crushing bone. The metallic figure remained still, calculating. It raised one arm, and another pulse of blue energy erupted from its core, aimed directly at the T-Rex's head. But this time, the Rex was ready. It twisted mid-charge, avoiding the blast, and with one powerful leap, it lunged. Its massive jaws snapped shut but caught nothing. The figure had moved, not like an animal, not even like a predator. It had vanished and reappeared 5 feet away in an instant. The T-Rex skidded to a stop, confused, its amber eyes locking onto its target once more. The Velociraptors had regrouped, circling, their bodies low to the ground, eyes darting between the T-Rex and the figure. This wasn't a normal fight. Their leader let out a sharp screech, an order. They had to adapt. The raptors darted together, weaving between the Rex's legs, using the chaos to outmaneuver their enemy. The figure turned to meet them. One raptor leapt high, claws aiming for its chest. The figure caught it mid-air. There was a flash of light, and then the raptor was gone. Not thrown, not killed. It had disappeared. The pack hesitated, confusion rippling through them. The T-Rex roared. It didn't care where the raptor had gone. It only cared that the battle wasn't over. It charged again, this time swinging its powerful tail in a wide arc. The attack connected. The force of the impact sent the figure flying, crashing through the jungle, slamming into a thick tree. Leaves and branches rained down. The raptors froze. The T-Rex huffed, nostrils flaring, waiting. The jungle held its breath. Then, from within the wreckage, the figure rose. The glow of its body was brighter now. It had changed, and now it was angry. The T-Rex's tail slam had been devastating, sending the metallic figure crashing through the jungle like a meteor. Trees snapped under the force of the impact, their trunks splintering as the creature's body tore through them. Leaves rained down, filling the air with the scent of crushed foliage. The ground trembled, and for a moment, everything was still. The Velociraptors remained frozen in place, their sleek bodies low to the ground, sharp eyes locked onto the wreckage where the figure had landed. Their instincts screamed at them to run, but their leader held firm. It knew this fight wasn't over. The Tyrannosaurus Rex huffed, shaking its massive head, saliva dripping from its powerful jaws. Its nostrils flared as it inhaled deeply, scenting the air for blood, but there was none. No scent of flesh, no familiar tang of a wounded opponent. Then movement. A faint blue glow flickered within the tangled mass of broken branches and crushed leaves. Started dim, barely noticeable, but then it grew, and with it came a low, vibrating hum, pulsing through the air like a heartbeat. The glow intensified, casting unnatural shadows across the jungle floor. Then suddenly the figure stood. The Velociraptors let out sharp screeches, their tails flicking as they took a step back, their instincts warning them of the impossible. The T-Rex snarled. This thing shouldn't be moving. It should be dead. But it wasn't. The metallic creature rose from the debris, its body now radiating a pulse of blue energy. Something had changed. The impact had not weakened it, it had awakened something inside it. Before, its movements had been calculated, measured. Now they were faster, more aggressive. The symbols along its body burned brighter, pulsing in a rhythmic sequence. The jungle around it reacted, the leaves shivering despite the lack of wind. The very air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Then, the creature's head turned toward the T-Rex. The ground cracked beneath its feet as it took a single step forward. The T-Rex roared in defiance, lowering its head, ready to charge again. It had faced other predators before, Spinosaurus, other T-Rexes, even packs of raptors. But this thing was different. It had no scent, no weakness, no fear. And now it was coming for him. The figure vanished. Not moved, vanished. One moment it was standing amidst the wreckage, the next it was gone. The T-Rex's head snapped left, then right, nostrils flaring. Where? A flash of blue light, a searing pain. The T-Rex staggered back. A deep gash burned into its side, sizzling with blue energy. It let out a furious roar, whipping its head around, but there was nothing there. Then another strike, this time from behind. The creature had reappeared in an instant, its metallic limbs moving in a blur, striking at the T-Rex's legs, leaving behind scorching marks that crackled with raw energy. The raptors watched in horrified fascination. They had seen dominance before. They had seen predators fight to claim the throne. But this was something else. For the first time, the T-Rex struggled to stay on its feet. The king of the dinosaurs, the apex predator of this world, was being overwhelmed. The Velociraptor leader let out a sharp series of clicks, its brain working fast. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was about survival. And for the first time, it saw an opportunity. It would not let the T-Rex die. Not because of loyalty, not because of pity, but because if the T-Rex fell, they were next. The leader gave the signal. The raptors moved. They charged. Not at the T-Rex, at the creature. In perfect synchronization, the raptors struck, leaping toward the figure from multiple angles. Their claws flashed, their teeth bared. They would tear it apart piece by piece. But the figure did not flinch. Instead, it turned. The blue glow expanded, a shockwave of energy erupting from its core. The first raptor was caught mid-air, frozen for a fraction of a second, then disintegrated. The second slammed into the energy field, thrown backward like a leaf in a storm. It hit the ground, unmoving. The rest of the pack hesitated. Fear seeped into their instincts. The leader screeched in frustration, trying to keep them in line, but it was too late. This was not a fight they could win. Not alone. The T-Rex, still breathing heavily, watched. It could feel its strength slipping from the wounds burning along its body. But it understood something now. This wasn't just a predator. This was something else entirely. And for the first time in its life, it wasn't the biggest threat in the jungle. The metallic figure turned its attention back to the T-Rex, its glowing eyes narrowing, analyzing, calculating its next move. And then the ground shook. Not from the creature, not from the T-Rex, not from the raptors. Something else was coming. A deep, rumbling vibration echoed through the jungle, distant at first, but getting closer. The figure paused, its head tilting slightly as if it, too, had sensed the shift. The T-Rex lifted its head, nostrils flaring. The Velociraptor leader flicked its tail, sensing something on the wind. And then, from the distant horizon, a second sphere fell from the sky. That's 7,500 words total. Party popper, this batch builds on the high-stakes battle. But now we see a temporary alliance forming between the T-Rex and the raptors as they realize they share a common enemy. And now another sphere has arrived. What's inside it? Is it another enemy? A reinforcement for the first? Or something even worse? The ground trembled beneath them as the second sphere descended from the sky, its metallic surface reflecting the dim light filtering through the jungle canopy. It moved with an unnatural grace, slowing just before impact, hovering for a moment before finally settling on the ground with a dull, resonant thud. The first sphere remained open, its glowing core still pulsing with rhythmic energy, as if responding to the arrival of its counterpart. The T-Rex's breaths came in heavy bursts, thick strands of saliva dripping from its powerful jaws. It was hurt, wounded by the strange energy blasts that had seared its flesh, but it was not beaten. The Velociraptor pack stood frozen, their instincts screaming for them to flee, but their leader held firm, could feel the shifting tide of the battle. Something was changing. Something beyond their understanding was unfolding. The metallic figure that had emerged from the first sphere slowly turned its head toward the second one. The symbols along its body flickered, pulsing in a new pattern, stood still as if waiting, calculating. The jungle, once filled with the sounds of predators and prey locked in an endless cycle of survival, had become an eerie void of silence. Even the wind had stilled. Then, without warning, the second sphere split open. A hiss of steam erupted from its center, and the air crackled with invisible energy. The raptors tensed, their tails flicking as they readied themselves for an unknown enemy. The T-Rex took a cautious step back, muscles coiling, preparing to strike if necessary. But what emerged from the sphere was not another metallic figure. It was different, larger. The form that stepped forward was almost reptilian in shape, but its body was sleek, armored in an unnatural alloy that shimmered as it moved. Its head bore the same glowing symbols as the first entity, but its eyes burned with a deeper, more intense light. Unlike the first figure, which had moved with mechanical precision, this one exuded raw, primal power. The first figure, the one that had attacked the dinosaurs, shifted slightly, tilting its head as if recognizing the newcomer. For a long, heavy moment, the two stood facing each other, unreadable expressions locked in some silent communication. Then the second figure moved. It did not attack. Instead, it raised one clawed hand and let out a deep, reverberating sound, almost like a growl. The first figure hesitated. The T-Rex watched intently, nostrils flaring as it tried to decipher the exchange. The raptors remained low to the ground, their sharp eyes darting between the two metallic creatures, unsure whether they were witnessing an alliance or a confrontation. Then, the first figure took a step back. The jungle held its breath. The second figure turned its head, scanning the battlefield, and its glowing eyes locked onto the T-Rex. The energy that surrounded it shifted, changing from the cold, calculated force of the first figure into something more reactive, more alive. The air grew heavier, pressing down on every living thing around it. And then it spoke. The sound was unlike anything the dinosaurs had ever heard. Not words, not a roar, but a sequence of vibrations that seemed to echo inside their skulls. The T-Rex let out a low, warning growl in response, but it did not move. It sensed something in this creature, something different from the first attacker. The raptors, however, did not trust it. The leader let out a sharp screech, and the pack reacted instantly, darting in a coordinated attack toward the second figure. Their claws flashed in the dim light as they lunged, aiming for its limbs, its throat, its weak points. But this time, there was no energy blast, no vanishing act. The second figure moved with speed that defied logic, sidestepping the first strike while twisting to avoid the second. It lashed out with a whip-like tail, catching one of the raptors midair and sending it sprawling into the underbrush. Another raptor leapt from behind, aiming for its exposed back, but the figure spun, catching the creature mid-pounce. Instead of vaporizing it like the first entity had, it merely tossed the raptor aside, as if refusing to kill it. The pack hesitated. The leader clicked sharply, signaling them to regroup. The second figure took a step forward, its energy pulsing in an almost calming rhythm, but the raptors were not ready to trust it. The T-Rex, however, was watching closely. It had seen the difference. The first figure had attacked with pure aggression, an attempt to dominate, to control. This one was different. It was not an enemy. Not yet. Then the first figure moved. It had been standing still, observing, but now it stepped forward again, the symbols along its body flaring violently. It turned toward the second figure, and for the first time, its mechanical movements seemed almost hostile. The energy around it crackled, and without warning, it launched an attack. A pulse of blue lightning erupted from its hand, arcing through the air toward the second figure. But this time, the attack did not land. The second figure raised one arm, and a barrier of shifting energy materialized in front of it. The lightning strike met the barrier and dispersed, crackling harmlessly into the jungle floor. The two figures stood motionless, locked in an unspoken standoff. The T-Rex took another step forward, its injured side burning but its instincts sharper than ever. It understood now. These beings were not here for food, not for territory. They were something beyond the natural order of this world. They were at war, and the dinosaurs had been caught in the middle. The Velociraptor leader seemed to realize this as well. It let out a slow, uncertain clicking sound, its sharp eyes flicking between the two figures. The pack behind it remained tense, ready to attack, ready to flee. But their leader did not signal either. The second figure turned its head slightly, as if acknowledging the change in the battlefield. It did not turn its weapons on the dinosaurs. Instead, it faced its original counterpart once more. The first figure moved again, raising both arms, the glow of its energy growing brighter. The air crackled with rising tension. The jungle around them seemed to pulse with anticipation. Then, all at once, everything exploded into motion. The first figure launched forward, moving with inhuman speed, a streak of blue energy cutting through the air. The second figure met it halfway, blocking the attack with its own energy shield before retaliating with a blast of its own. The impact sent shockwaves through the jungle, trees bending and breaking under the force. The T-Rex roared, shaking the earth, and lunged forward. It no longer cared about the differences between these creatures. It only knew that one of them was a threat, and threats had to be eliminated. The raptors followed their leader's call, darting in a blur of movement toward the first figure, their claws slashing at its limbs, their fangs aiming for any exposed weakness. The battle had begun again, but this time the dinosaurs were not fighting alone. For the first time, predator and prey had joined forces, and they would fight for their world. The jungle had become a war zone. The two otherworldly figures clashed with terrifying force, their movements defying everything the dinosaurs had ever encountered. Every strike sent shockwaves through the trees, bending trunks and splintering branches. The air crackled with electricity as energy blasts cut through the dense foliage, leaving scorched earth in their wake. The T-Rex had no concept of what these creatures were or where they had come from, but it didn't need to understand. It only knew one thing: one of them was an enemy. The other had not attacked. And in the brutal, primal world of survival, that was all that mattered. The first figure, the one that had attacked without hesitation, moved with relentless aggression. Its glowing blue energy pulsed in waves, each movement faster than the last. The second figure, the one that had emerged from the second sphere, countered with equal precision, but there was a difference. While the first moved like a conqueror, striking without care for the destruction it caused, the second fought with restraint, as if trying to contain the battle rather than escalate it. The Velociraptors darted through the chaos, using the fight between the two giants as a cover for their own attacks. Their leader was the first to strike, slashing its curved sickle claw at the first figure's leg. The impact sent a burst of blue sparks flying, but the creature barely reacted, merely shifting its weight to throw the raptor off balance. Another raptor lunged from behind, snapping its jaws at what it thought was a weak point, only to be flung backward by an unseen force. The T-Rex roared, the sound echoing through the valley. It had waited long enough. With a powerful lunge, it charged at the first figure, its massive jaws wide open, ready to tear into metal and energy alike. But the figure reacted in an instant, vanishing just before the Rex's teeth could sink into it. The sudden absence of resistance threw the T-Rex forward, causing it to slam into the jungle floor, its tail carving a deep trench in the earth. The second figure seized the moment, releasing a controlled pulse of energy toward its adversary. The blast struck the first figure square in the chest, sending it skidding back through the dirt, carving a deep gash into the landscape. For the first time, the aggressor hesitated. The symbols along its body flickered erratically, as if struggling to process the damage. The raptors, emboldened by the sight, surged forward again. This time, they coordinated with the T-Rex, attacking in unison. The leader leapt onto the first figure's back, its claws digging into the glowing lines that pulsed along its spine. The others flanked, striking at the creature's legs, forcing it to divide its attention. The T-Rex recovered from its fall, eyes burning with fury. It turned sharply, dust and leaves swirling around its massive frame. It had watched, learned. The enemy was fast, but it wasn't invincible. With a thunderous roar, it swung its tail, aiming not at the figure itself, but at the ground beneath it. The impact shattered the earth, creating an explosion of debris that temporarily blinded the enemy. The second figure moved in that instant, striking with precision. Its arm extended, a pulse of energy wrapping around the first figure's torso like a constricting force. The blue glow of its body flickered again, dimming for just a moment, and then it let out a sound. Not mechanical, not energy-based, but something eerily close to an animal's growl. The Velociraptor leader faltered for just a second, as if recognizing something familiar in the noise. Clicked its jaws, a slow, testing sound. The first figure shifted. Its body twitched, as though something deep inside it was resisting. The second figure took a step closer, its energy stabilizing. It wasn't trying to kill the other. It was trying to subdue it. The jungle went still again, tension crackling like the air before a storm. The T-Rex held back, muscles coiled, waiting for the next attack. The raptors did the same. The first figure, its glow now unstable, lifted its head and let out a deep, distorted sound, almost a snarl of defiance. Then, without warning, the light in its body pulsed in one final surge. The second figure staggered backward, its control over the enemy slipping. The first figure twisted free, its movements frantic now, less precise, more desperate. It was no longer an unshakable force. It was something struggling to hold itself together, and it was about to go out of control. The symbols along its body flared bright white, no longer the pulsing blue they had been before. The jungle floor beneath it cracked, energy leaking from its form. The T-Rex sensed the change immediately, taking an instinctive step back. The raptors did the same, their leader clicking sharply, signaling the pack to retreat. The second figure didn't move. Instead, it raised both arms, and in an instant, the energy around it shifted. It wasn't attacking, it was containing. The air vibrated as a barrier of force surrounded the failing figure, locking it in place. But the first figure refused to be captured. It fought against the containment, its body convulsing, sparks flying in all directions. It let out a sound that was neither a roar nor a scream, but something unnatural, something raw. And then, in one final burst of energy, it collapsed inward. For a moment, everything went white. The shockwave that followed sent the T-Rex skidding backward, its claws digging deep into the dirt to hold itself steady. The raptors were thrown off their feet, tumbling through the underbrush. The trees bent, their branches snapping under the pressure. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The first figure was gone. Not destroyed, not broken, simply gone. As if it had never been there at all. The second figure remained standing in the clearing, its energy stabilizing once more. It turned its gaze toward the dinosaurs, its glowing eyes meeting the T-Rex's. For a long, heavy moment, neither moved. Then, the figure took a single step back. The T-Rex growled low in its throat, a sound not of aggression, but of acknowledgement. The Velociraptor leader flicked its tail, watching closely. It did not attack. And then, the second figure did something unexpected. It placed its hand against the ground, and for the briefest moment, the symbols along its body pulsed in a sequence. The earth beneath it shifted slightly, but instead of destruction, the energy faded, leaving only the mark of something ancient. The T-Rex exhaled slowly, the adrenaline in its blood finally beginning to settle. The jungle, once still, began to stir again. The distant sounds of insects and smaller creatures hesitantly returned. The second figure straightened, casting one last glance at the dinosaurs. Then, with a final surge of light, it vanished. The clearing was left in ruins, but the battle was over. The T-Rex lifted its head, scanning the jungle, its massive chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. It had survived. It had fought, adapted, and endured. And for the first time in its life, it had faced something greater than itself, and lived to remember it. The raptors slowly began to move again, their leader letting out a soft, questioning screech. There was no immediate answer, but they knew, deep in their instincts, that whatever had just happened would not be the last time their world would change. For now, the jungle belonged to them once more. But somewhere, far beyond the trees, something else was watching, waiting, because the war was far from over. The jungle remained eerily silent in the wake of the battle. The energy that had once crackled through the air had dissipated, leaving behind an almost unnatural stillness. The T-Rex stood at the center of the clearing, its massive chest heaving with exhaustion, its body aching from wounds that still smoldered from the strange being's attacks. It had fought many battles in its lifetime, but none like this. The Velociraptors gathered in a loose formation, their bodies tense, their sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any sign that the otherworldly figure might return. Their leader, the largest and most intelligent among them, clicked its jaws, a slow and deliberate signal. The others waited, their instincts screaming at them to flee, but their leader did not move. It knew something that the others did not. It could feel that the battle was not truly over. The T-Rex's nostrils flared as it inhaled deeply, taking in the scent of the ruined battlefield. The metallic scent of the creatures lingered in the air, but it was fading. The second figure, the one that had seemed less hostile, had disappeared in an instant, leaving behind no trace except for the faint, pulsing marks in the dirt. The first one, the true enemy, was gone, disintegrated, erased from existence. But where had it gone? And more importantly, would it return? A sudden rustling in the distance made every predator turn their heads. The jungle had been lifeless moments ago, but now something was moving. The T-Rex lifted its head, muscles coiling as it prepared for another fight. The Velociraptors crouched low, ready to strike. Then, from beyond the trees, a deep rumbling began to echo through the valley. It was different from before, not mechanical, not unnatural. This was something the dinosaurs recognized, something primal. Footsteps, massive, thunderous footsteps. The T-Rex shifted its weight, its powerful tail sweeping behind it for balance. The raptors remained motionless, their bodies pressed low against the jungle floor. The sound was getting closer, and then it appeared. From the shadows of the dense trees, another Tyrannosaurus Rex emerged. But this one was different. Its skin was marked with deep scars, its left eye clouded over with age, its body leaner but still powerful. It was older, larger, one who had survived the harshest battles of time. It did not roar, did not charge. Instead, it watched. The younger T-Rex held its ground, exhaling heavily through flared nostrils. It knew this beast. It had crossed its scent before, in the farthest reaches of the jungle, where the rivers ran deep and the mountains clawed at the sky. This was a rival, an ancient warrior of the land. The Velociraptors remained frozen, caught between two giants, their leader tilting its head slightly as it calculated the shift in power. The older T-Rex took a slow step forward, its single good eye locked onto the younger one. This was not a challenge. It was something else. It had seen the battle. It had watched from the shadows as the younger one had fought against something beyond their world. And now it was here, drawn by the scent of something that did not belong to the land. For a long moment, the two apex predators simply stood there, watching each other, neither making a move. Then, slowly, the older T-Rex turned its head, gazing at the scorched earth, at the markings left behind by the strange beings. It let out a deep, rumbling growl, not a threat, but a warning. The younger T-Rex understood. The jungle had changed. This was no longer just a land of flesh and claw. Something had arrived, something that did not hunt for survival, something that did not play by the rules of nature. And it would return. The Velociraptor leader let out a sharp clicking sound, breaking the stillness. The pack remained ready, their instincts still screaming at them to run, but their leader made a different choice. They would stay. The old T-Rex took another step forward, coming side by side with the younger one. It was a rare moment, a sight few had ever witnessed. Two of the mightiest creatures of the land, standing together, not as rivals but as something else. All understood what this meant. The jungle was no longer theirs alone, and the next time the sky split open and the metal beings returned, they would not be caught unprepared. The T-Rex lifted its head to the sky, inhaling deeply, memorizing the scent of the battle. The older one did the same. The Velociraptor leader observed, its sharp mind piecing together what this meant for the pack. The land had changed, the world had changed, and the war had only just begun. The jungle stretched into the distance, untouched and ancient, but beneath its towering trees, a quiet tension lingered. The T-Rex stood firm, its powerful body aching from the battle but its instincts sharper than ever. The older Rex beside it exhaled slowly, its clouded eye watching the clearing with an understanding that came only with time. The Velociraptors remained close, their leader clicking its jaws in thought, weighing the risks of staying in a place where something unnatural had just unfolded. The air still carried traces of the metallic figures. Though they had vanished, their presence lingered in ways the dinosaurs couldn't explain. The younger T-Rex could still feel the burn of energy against its flesh, the unnatural way the creatures had moved, their complete disregard for the order of life and death in this world. It had fought many battles, but this had been different. It had not been a fight for dominance or territory. It had been something else entirely. The older T-Rex lifted its head, tasting the wind. It was searching for something, perhaps trying to make sense of what had happened. It had seen the battle, though it had arrived too late to interfere. Now it had a choice. Leave, as it had always done, retreating into the deepest parts of the jungle, or acknowledge that things had changed. The younger one had fought something that could not be explained, something that could not be defeated with mere strength alone. That meant the balance of power had shifted, and in a world ruled by instinct, adaptation was the only path to survival. The Velociraptor leader tilted its head slightly, eyes darting between the two larger creatures. There had always been a hierarchy in this jungle, one that was set in blood and survival. The T-Rex was at the top, the raptors the cunning hunters that worked in packs to outthink their prey. But now, all of them had been preyed upon by something greater. Their roles no longer mattered as much as they once had. The leader clicked sharply, signaling its pack to fall into formation. They did not scatter. They did not run. The younger T-Rex huffed, muscles shifting as it moved, testing its wounded body. The injuries would heal. Scars would form, reminders of what had happened here. But it knew that this was only the beginning. There was no certainty that these creatures would never return. And if they did, the dinosaurs could not afford to be caught unaware. The older T-Rex turned toward the younger one, letting out a low growl. Not a challenge, but a sound of understanding. It had seen many things in its lifetime. It had survived through changes in the jungle, through the rise and fall of creatures that had once dominated the land. But this was different. This was something no predator could have prepared for. The younger one growled back, shifting its weight. It did not fear the older Rex, but it did not dismiss it either. The jungle had changed. They both knew it, and that meant the old ways of fighting for dominance, of tearing at each other over territory, were now secondary to something greater. The Velociraptor leader took a step forward, clicking its jaws. It did not fear the Rexes, not anymore. The battle had forced them to fight together, and now it saw something it had never considered before: coexistence. Not as equals, but as those who had survived the impossible. For the first time in the history of the jungle, predator and predator did not turn against each other when the dust had settled. They all simply stood there, listening, waiting, because they knew the sky would split open again. The metal creatures would return, and next time the jungle would not be unprepared. The jungle was never truly silent, but in the wake of what had transpired, there was a stillness that none of its inhabitants had ever known. The echoes of the battle had long since faded, but the ground still carried the scars of where the unnatural had clashed with the ancient. Trees lay broken, the earth was scorched in places where energy had seared through it, and the scent of something beyond this world still lingered in the air. The younger T-Rex lifted its head toward the sky. It could not comprehend what had happened in the same way a human might, but it understood one undeniable truth. The jungle it had always known was no longer the same. Something had shifted. The world it ruled had been trespassed upon by something greater, something beyond its grasp. And though the battle had ended, it felt in the deepest part of its instincts that it was not over. The older T-Rex turned away from the clearing, stepping slowly through the ruins of the fight. It did not look back at the younger one or the raptors. It had made its decision. For years, it had survived by trusting only itself, by staying away from battles it did not need to fight. But now, it had seen something that changed everything. If these creatures returned, and the old Rex believed they would, then this world would have to fight together. The Velociraptor leader watched the massive beast disappear into the jungle, its sharp mind calculating, assessing what had just taken place. It had never known a world where the T-Rex was anything but a force to be feared, to be avoided unless absolutely necessary. But today it had fought beside one. It had attacked something beyond its comprehension, something it should have run from, but it had stayed. And now, the jungle had changed in ways that even it could not fully understand. The raptors remained behind their leader, waiting for the next move. Some of them were still tense, their muscles coiled, ready to flee at the first sign of more danger. Others had begun to calm, sensing that the battle was truly over, at least for now. But they all knew they had crossed into something unknown. The younger T-Rex turned toward the raptors, exhaling deeply, its nostrils flaring. It was not an offering of peace. It was not an attempt at understanding. But it was something that had never happened before. A moment where predator and hunter did not immediately turn against each other once the true enemy was gone. The Velociraptor leader took a step forward, watching carefully. It did not hiss. It did not bare its teeth. The moment lasted only a few breaths, but it was enough. Then, with a flick of its tail, the leader clicked its jaws and turned, signaling its pack to move. The raptors hesitated only briefly before obeying, their lean bodies slipping into the undergrowth, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. They would not stay here. Not now. The younger T-Rex was alone once more. But this time, the silence felt different. It watched as the raptors vanished, as the jungle swallowed them back into its depths. It knew they were still there, that they would always be there. But now, something had shifted between them. There was no fear, no aggression, just the lingering awareness that they had survived something together. The sky overhead was darkening, streaked with the deep reds and oranges of the setting sun. The jungle would return to its rhythm soon. The sounds of life would creep back in, the endless cycle of hunt and survival continuing as it always had. But beneath it all, the world had been changed. Somewhere, beyond the trees, beyond the rivers and mountains, the T-Rex knew there were others like it. Others who had not witnessed what had taken place today. Others who still ruled their own parts of the land, unaware that their world had been touched by something greater. And somewhere beyond the stars, in places the T-Rex could never comprehend, the metal creatures still existed. They would return. The young Rex did not know when. It did not know how. But when they did, the jungle would be ready. The world would remember. The dinosaurs would fight. And this time, they would not fight alone.